What plays in your mind as it gets to round 4 and round 5?
My opponent was a very tough guy, and, he's never been finished. But I was like, I'm going to finish this guy. And I caught him in a really, really tight choke, like in the 3rd round. Like, I squeezed 5, 4, 3, 2. And I'm like, what the hell? He's still alive.
From a small town called Jordan, is that correct?
So originally I'm from Palestine.
Okay.
And that's where I get my last name from, Al-Selwady. So I'm from a village in Palestine called Selwad, and that's where I'm originally from. I was born and raised here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the States. And then in 2008, my family, they retired and they moved to Jordan. And that's where I lived and started MMA. So I lived there for like 6 years. And then I still had, some family here. So I would visit back and forth every chance I got, like in university breaks, to start, finding out where am I going to take the next level of MMA, which gym am I going to train at. And I came here to Dallas, and I trained with Coach Safe. At that time, it was like Octagon MMA before Fortis. And I just fell in love with the way he took MMA training.
At what age would you say that was?
That was at 18, 19, where I started to come see Coach Safe. Okay. I started MMA really young. I started my first professional fight at 17 years old.
Wow. I guess if we go back into that time, what was it at a young age that got you into fighting and that wanted you to go that route? As a child, did you love to get in fights? Were you an angry child? Or what was it that kind of made you want to go into a physical sport like MMA?
So being a young kid and the way like my dad raised me, being the best was always like about being the toughest. And being the toughest always, to me, was like who could win a fight, like be strong. To be tough, you had to be strong. But then, you would lift weights. Maybe someone would lift more than you, and you'd be like, I could still beat that guy up. Yeah. I got into a lot of fights as a kid, but not that I was always looking for problems or I was a bully. I was always defending kids, and I was fighting bullies. Because in my head, I was always very strong, but I wasn't an aggressive person. So I hated when I see someone that acted tough by bullying other people. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? You can't do that. So I wanted to fight, but I wanted a good reason to fight. You know?
And that was throughout middle school? And
that was like elementary, middle school.
Okay.
And my parents, I was always getting into fights, so they never let me do martial arts because they're like, if you're not doing martial arts and you're getting into this many fights, what's going to happen when we actually train you and, you'll know what you're doing? Yeah. And that's actually the total opposite of what happened. Of when I actually started training MMA and doing kickboxing, that was the end of ever having issues in school.
At what age would you say you started training if your first fight was at the age of 17?
16.
At 16, wow.
1 year. It was crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but I've been an athlete all my life. I mean, I did soccer, baseball, football, basketball, everything you could think of. My family tried to put me in all the sports except martial arts. Mm-hmm. And nothing to me made me feel like this is what I want to do.
What clicked that said, okay, I'm going to go sign up today and I'm going to start this journey?
So I started to do my physical training because my idea was, all right, the thing that I love the most is football. So I was in Jordan. They don't have football over there. I worked a lot on my physical training, like the footwork, strength. I was looking on YouTube, how to get ready for a football season while I was in Jordan. So my goal was, all right, I get very physical and I have all that physical abilities down. And then I finish high school, come over here, apply for a scholarship for football. So as I was getting ready for that in my head, this was still 10th grade, I still had 2 years. As I was getting ready for that, I started going to a gym just to kind of lift weights and be part of that training regimen for me. And
was that in Baton Rouge or were you in
Dallas?
No,
that was in Jordan.
In Jordan, okay.
Yeah, and then I started seeing people train kickboxing over there, and it just ignited a fire in me. I was like, whoa, that's cool. And I went in over there, it's not like over here you just sign waivers and you got to go through a whole program before you spar. The first thing I did over there was put some gloves on, you just start fighting with someone. Like,
You over there just on vacation, or did you move back over there?
yeah, no,
or-
my parents retired, man. So
Okay.
we were just living there, and it was like a culture shock for me.
At what age did you go back?
I went there in 2008, so I was like 13 years old.
And you guys went pretty much to live back over there
Just
in
live,
Jordan?
yeah, suddenly
Okay.
just, go, and we lived there. So after I kind of, it took me like a year or two to kind of find myself, to get acclimated with, it's a very different world over there, but so I got used to it kind of, and in my head every day it's like, I'm going back to America. Like, I can't stand it over here. Like, I can't. But then I found, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and that made me kind of focused on that. I wasn't such in a hurry to come back over here anymore because I just fell in love with the sport. I would spend like 6 hours at the gym. They would beg me, like, please just leave, go home, man. Like, your session finished.
Yeah.
So I'd go there like 2 hours before. I'd do my 1 hour training at that time, then stay there 3 hours later, just doing all types of training. I was just obsessed.
And when did you come back into the United States?
Officially 2016,
Okay.
like to live back after I finished, my high school and university. But in that time where I started MMA, it was like 2012, 2016. I was just winning fights back after back. And it was like on the biggest TV channel in the Middle East. Like, I got big over there, like, so quick. And then in 2012 to 2013, I fought 3 fights until I reached the title fight. It was the biggest underdog on that fight because I was still like a little kid fighting this jiu-jitsu black belt. I knocked him out in the first round.
Wow. And that was still over there while you were
Still
living
over there.
in Jordan?
It was like one of the biggest MMA promotions that came out of the Middle East. And I was just winning fights after fights. And each fight I fought, I was always the underdog just because people are like, he's a kid.
Yeah.
But I was working harder than everyone.
And how old were you at that time? 22?
17, 18.
Oh, wow. So very young.
Yeah,
Okay.
very young. And then at 19 years old, I became the Ultimate Fighter here.
Mm-hmm.
That we had a Middle Eastern version of the Ultimate Fighter. I was the coach. And then there was another fighter, my opponent, he was the coach. And our teams fought, we went through that program, and it was like a big TV series for like 6 months, aired on TV. And that also blew me up a little bit more. So fight after fight, I started to grow. And then I fought for Brave Combat Federation, which was like an international promotion. Started fighting guys that were like ex-UFC fighters, Brazilian fighters, European fighters, like, it was like that next level.
Now, when you win that fight and you win the championship belt at that time, what happens the next day? You wake up. What's on your mind the next day? Is there a new goal, or where do you go from there?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first, you go through a very tough camp, and, you're like almost in a very dark place for like 2-3 months. And the first thing you want to do is just to be able to like live that champion life and enjoy it for like a day. And then after that day, you're like, well, I need to get back to work because, again, I'm obsessed. It's not something I do just for a particular goal where once I win, that's it, I'm done. I just start to look for the next big thing. Who's the next tough guy that thinks he could beat me? What's the next title that I could win? And it's like a bigger thing than what I have.
Now, you have a nickname that goes by the Pride of Palestine. How did you get that nickname, and when did that start?
So I'm originally from Palestine, and there's a big war going on over there. And I stayed true to my roots, and I represent my people with the best ability that I can. And when I go out there and I raise the Palestine flag, and I have my Palestine mouthpiece and my Palestine fight shorts, I'm like representing Palestine with every punch, with every kick, with every part of MMA that I do, and I bring exposure to my people. And it's like, that's my platform. Fighting is my platform to represent my people.
Now, your MMA record says that it's 14-3, but you've been fighting since the age of 17. When did the MMA record officially start counting for you?
Man, at my first fight, like over here, you would go through like an amateur phase where like, you win these fights, you lose, whatever. It doesn't really count on your professional record. But the way I got into professional MMA, it was like a crazy story. I was just, in Jordan, and then I saw a Facebook post about this gym that needed sparring partners for the guys that have a fight coming up. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I was still a little kid. I was like, well, if I could get some training with these guys. Maybe if I got my ass whooped, I'd still get some experience.
Right.
But I went there and I was actually beating these guys. I was doing really good. And the coach was like, "Hey, man, you got a good future.
Yeah.
You know, you do this for another 2-3 years, you'll be ready when you grow."
Yeah, I'm sure it's a confidence boost too when you're like, if I'm taking these guys on, now you're already starting to think a little bit further ahead
Exactly,
too.
because I come from a small gym. You know, I wasn't really exposed to these high-level guys out there that are fighting on TV. You know, the best guy that I would train with, he's fought like on the national level, like Jordan national champion, but not like maybe it's some Middle Eastern kickboxing champion, but they're all amateur. They're not professional. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, like 2 months later, the coach that I would go there and just spar his guys, he calls me and he's like, "Hey, there's a fight cancellation. Someone got injured. Would you like to fight in 10 days? And it's automatically, I said, yes.
And this was your first professional MMA fight.
I went from amateur juniors, like kids. I went from amateur juniors to professional men.
Now, did you say yes just because of the opportunity? Or did you actually believe that you're going to go in there and come out on top?
Oh, I knew I was going to win. Like, I was like, finally, this is my chance. And, like, the guy that they said I was going to fight, like, I've been seeing on TV, like, they had a commercial and stuff. I was like, that's the guy I'm going to fight. Like, it was really cool just watching it on TV. But then to know that that's the guy I'm going to fight, like, I already knew I was going to win. I was like, I'm going to crush this guy. No matter how crazy it sounded to, like, the people that knew me, they're like, you know, I was like, I'm going to beat this guy. And I trained, you know, I did that. I was for like 10 days, I was like super obsessed and I was excited. Everything was like such a new feeling. And I went out there and I knocked him out in the first round. 4 minutes, I was just dominating him. And then I finished him. And that was the beginning of it. It was insane. It was like, everyone was like, who is that guy? Who is that guy? Who is that kid?
And your most recent fight was February 17th of this year, right?
Yeah.
And it was against Murphy?
Yeah.
Now,
Murphy.
that one went 5 rounds. How does it feel when you go 5 rounds rather than to getting a first round knockout? Does it, when it gets to like round 4 or 5, do you start to doubt yourself a little bit where it's like, okay, why is this taking so long? Why can't I get him knocked out? Or what plays in your mind as it gets to round 4 and round 5?
Man, that's a good question because I've trained a lot for 5-round fights, but it always ended like in the first round or second round. But with every fight, just because I finished the fights, that doesn't mean, you know, I get cocky in my preparation for the next fight and I'm like, I don't need the cardio. I mean, I trained really hard for that fight, like every fight. And I knew my opponent was a very tough guy and, you know, he's never been finished, but I was like, I'm going to finish this guy. And I caught him in a really, really tight choke, like in the 3rd round. Like I squeezed, and it was so tight that I was like, look, you don't need your energy for the later rounds because you could finish it right here, right now. And in my head, I was just closing my eyes, and I would count 5 seconds. I'd be like, all right, he's going to sleep. 5, 4, 3, 2. And I'm like, what the hell? He's still alive. 5, 4. And I just kept doing that until he like slipped out. And by that time, my arms were burned, like physically.
And it wore you out.
It wore me out a lot because I was like, that's it. Like, I don't need my energy because I'm about to finish him. But that's whenever my mental and my heart kicked in. And I was like, I'm not going to lose this fight. So even though I was tired, I knew that he was tired. And I just made sure, I just kept trying to finish that fight, man. That fight, I kept trying to finish. But I dominated him for all the 5 rounds to a point where some judges gave me like 10-8 rounds, and that's not too common in MMA.
Did it feel good coming out on top?
I'm
sure it did after 5 rounds.
Of course. I mean, I won that title, and I felt like I just put a stamp on it, called out the UFC, like, come on, guys, like, how many more wins do I have to win for you to hit me up?
And is that when they actually acknowledged you?
Yeah. I mean, they know about me from before, and, I mean, you ask anyone that watches my fights and that knows me, everyone's like, always, why aren't you in the UFC? I mean, there's a bunch of guys in the UFC that you're much better than. Your record, the people you fought, the people you beat. Why aren't you in the UFC? To be honest, I don't know. That's just, I believe, a path that God put for me, like just the timing of everything. And I believe, I mean, I'm right now more ready than I ever was.
Yeah, and even on like Topology.com, they have you ranked as a number 7 lightweight in the country. Do you feel like their ranking is correct? Do you feel like you should be up more, or how do you feel about being number 7?
Honestly, man, I don't even look at those rankings. They're not really accurate. I mean, it could say number 1, it could say 20. That's not really what I worry about. my main thing is to be in the UFC and be ranked number 1 in the UFC, because those are the rankings that really matter.
Does UFC and some of those other guys, do they look at these websites and what the rankings show to maybe make a decision? Do you think that plays a factor?
I mean, it does factor in a little bit to what they do, but really what I believe that they look at is your performance and the fights that you're in and the timing, when they need you, at the same time, like where you were at in your career.
Now it's finally time for your first big step towards the UFC, I guess you could say, right? And that's going to be on August 15th of 2023, which is coming up in less than 2 months.
Yeah.
I know you've been training every day. Your fight's going to be against George Hardwick. Very tough fighter. I'm sure you know he's a very tough fighter. I know you're not a statistics guy, but the stats online are showing that they're giving him a 96% chance of winning this fight and you a 4% chance.
Nice.
That's that. I know you said your whole life you've been the underdog, and I'm sure that kind of feeds you into it. But at some point, it has to feel a little bit disrespectful to you that only 4% out of 100 are believing in you to win that fight. Do you like being the underdog? Do you like having everybody go against you and proving them wrong?
Man, I love it. It fuels me because, like, no matter what, I'm always going to train hard. But when everyone knows I'm going to win that fight, and then I win that fight, it's like, well, okay, I mean, we already knew you were going to win, right? Yeah. So I want that energy to stay there. So when I destroy this guy and I beat him and I finish him, everyone's like, you tell them, like, what now? What's your excuse right now? I don't want to beat someone that, everyone knows or thinks I'm going to beat. And then, they're going to be like, well, yeah, I mean, he wasn't that good anyways. I mean, yeah, obviously you were going to win. You have this, that. Yeah. I want everyone to believe that he's the toughest guy. He's the guy that's going to stop me. So when I beat him, everyone knows that they're wrong.
Yeah. And the competition we're talking about is the Dana White's Tuesday night contender series.
Yeah.
How many people are competing in this competition?
I think it's 5 fights that night. So 10 people. So yeah, it will be 5 fights for like each week. And it's like maybe a 2-month program that comes.
For you to make it out on top, how many fights do you have to win?
No, you just have to win that one fight.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, basically, I just beat George Hardwick and I just get my contract.
So August 15th, if you win, you get a UFC contract.
When I win.
When you win.
Yes.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
When you think back to being 17 and you're 28 now, right?
Yeah.
That's 11 years of waiting for this moment.
Yes. And then that motivates me even more to like, all right, when I win this fight, now it's going to like, you start all over. Like, this is the next step or the new chapter of the next level, And I've done that many times in my life where I just reach that new level. And for me, that's what excites me the most is entering that new level, that new chapter. I finished everything in the Middle East. I finished everything locally here. I won those titles. And now it's time to chase the ultimate goal, the UFC title.
Now, I know just speaking to other friends in the business and other associates of the MMA, the UFC, we know that the fighter pay isn't always the best until you start actually winning some fights and becoming a name of a company like UFC. With you being 28 years old, how do you manage to take care of your financial needs while training hard every day for the big moments?
So, that is very true. But the thing is, I love fighting, and that's where I see the main part of my career being. And I always knew the big money comes later. So I invested a lot in myself. And the way I was able to keep going is I set some things financially where like I train clients. You get sponsors for every fight. So I've been fortunate to have a lot of people that believe in me and they sponsor me for every fight. And I stay active while training clients outside of my fighting. So it's like a win-win because I get to help people get better, get more fit, learn MMA. Sometimes I'll train with them as well. So like I get that extra training. So my whole life, every day I'm in a gym,
Now, August 15th, when you win, you get the UFC contract. You finally enter the UFC, which is, every MMA fighter's dream, I guess you could say, right? From that point on, I feel like your career is almost kind of hitting this refresh button where it's just kind of starting from the beginning all over again, just at a completely different level. Where do you see yourself going from there? In a perfect world, how many fights do you think you would have to get in and keep winning and winning and winning to eventually hold the championship belt? Is it 3 fights, 6 fights, 8 fights?
In a perfect world, I'd love to fight August 15th, win that contract, and fight right away in October 21st in the UFC Abu Dhabi card. Number one, it's in the Middle East around all of my people. Number two, those are one of the biggest cards of the year. So, I mean, that would be a dream fight. And they only go there once a year. So it's like either this October or next October. I would love to, like, fresh off a win, just go right away, smash someone else in October. And then maybe, like, take a small break until January, fight again, or maybe December. But, you know, you get that, when you hit that reset button, that refresh button, you're in the UFC, it's like you said, you're starting all over again. And I'd love to have, you know, 3 to 4 fights a year, just keep building up myself. I'm not going to be in a rush to get the title, but I am going to be wanting to fight a lot of fights. I want to build myself there. I want to, you know, stamp myself in the UFC as one of the greatest fighters that were there. And to do that, you don't just get the short way there. You beat everyone on your way to the title.
I mean, August 15th is a big date for you. The whole Talker Nation is going to be cheering you on as well. We'll all be tuned in. We'll probably have a watch party here to cheer you on. So thank you for coming on to our show. Thank you for telling us your story, and good luck August 15th. When you win, we're going to celebrate when you come back to Dallas. Would love to have you back on our show and to talk about how everything went, how the whole trip was, how the feeling was after winning, and just all of the positivity that comes with it.
Of course. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and we'll definitely celebrate the win after.
Appreciate it. Thank you.